Babies coming through the barricades. As has been mentioned already, Police Service Northern Ireland are very used to, sadly, serious disorder like this on the streets of Belfast. It's almost like seasonal. We're coming up to the time of the year when they tend to have serious disorder and protests like this with barricades, with burning barricades, so that the officers, the public order trained officers, are very experienced. They're very well used to these sort of tactics where the vehicles then split and almost go in convoy and take the same route through the barricades or the burning barricades, as you can see on the screen now. So it's a normal police tactic, sadly, for them in Northern Ireland to then reconvene and reform at the top of the street, but to drive through the barriers, past the burning, the fire that's set alight in the roadway, and get to the other end of the street.
And Graham, we saw a bus that was set alight earlier. We can see some vehicles now that are on fire, and we know bins were set on fire earlier as well. And of course, there were peaceful protests earlier in the day, and it just seems to have escalated. And there are concerns that this could further escalate through the night.
I think that's always been the concern. You saw, it would seem more people out in the streets earlier on, but peaceful protests, people walking around the streets, not the disorder and the vehicles that are being set on fire, or the number of vehicles set on fire that we're now seeing. It does seem to be escalating, as you heard from your correspondents. You can feel the tension when you're on the streets. When you're actually there, you can feel tension start to rise. That seems to be the case now. That will be the concern for the police. I think one of the images on the screen, one of the live images, shows a property now on fire as well. So that will be the concern for the police, the public order commanders, to actually get resources into those areas and start dealing with these incidents of serious disorder that's taking place. But it looks like at least one property on fire there on the image on the left.
Yeah, Graham, part of the issue here is that it's happening in different pockets of Belfast. It's not just contained to the city centre. And I was speaking to Dan, our correspondent, who was in the city centre earlier where the bus was set on fire, and he sort of said that it had almost de-escalated there. But then Connor was saying where he was, it felt incredibly tense, as though things were ramping up where he was.
I think that was always a concern, that there was, as I said, there was like the peaceful protest we saw earlier with a majority of people protesting peacefully, but there was always the possibility and the concern that maybe the younger element would use this. As a previous guest has said, this happens seasonally and regularly, annually in Belfast around this time of year. It becomes, and again, they use the term, almost like a recreational event for some people. That was always a concern after last night's awful attack in the city. That this would be used by people as part of an event they do regularly anyway, to go out, set things on fire and escalate serious disorder. And sadly, as was almost predicted and feared, this is now what's happening.
Graham, thanks so much for that update. Let's bring in Amanda Ferguson, journalist based in Belfast, who is still with us. And Amanda, we're just looking at those earlier images of the police driving through the barricades. And of course, there's many images of cars set on fire, bus set on fire earlier. Our commentator just now, Graham, was just saying that we can also see the images of a property that's set on fire as well.
Yes, that's right. Obviously, a metal barrier is no competition for an armoured Land Rover, so the PSNI is very used to dealing with scenarios like this. However, it should be noted that the PSNI Chief Constable repeatedly points out how under-resourced the PSNI is. I haven't heard about any calls for mutual aid, but that may be something that will come in the days to come if there is further violence. We know that sometimes the rain can stop this, or an incident can stop this, or something like the World Cup happening on Thursday can stop this from happening. But it really just remains to be seen how long this is going to continue. You're hearing different pieces and snippets of information about people in homes that and businesses that are occupied by people who are migrants that seem to be coming under some sort of attack. But a lot of the violence that we're seeing can just be mindless, sporadic violence, and you can see some of the clips that are circulating online of just people shouting sort of racist chants and then continuing on with what they're doing. But the emergency services in Northern Ireland are very used to dealing with scenarios like this. But it is the case that there aren't as many police officers in Northern Ireland as there should be, and budgets are stretched to the max.
Amanda, we're really grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us. We're just looking at some of those live images coming in from Belfast, and you can see the fire brigade at the scene there where a house is burning. It's set on fire. Earlier, we saw bins had been set alight and a bus was burning out as well in the centre of town. We're going to keep across the images from Belfast. Anna will have more for you on the wrap coming up next.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
Tonight on The Wrap, disorder in Belfast as a 30-year-old Sudanese man is charged with attempted murder over a stabbing attack. Northern Ireland's police chief had urged people not to be duped into violent disorder.
Please, please, let the PSNI, let the police do their job. Unfettered and undistracted by wider concerns there may be about disorder.
Well, tonight on the show, we'll be discussing that and the day's biggest stories with Jenny Kleeman and Ali Mirage. Plus, we'll take a first look at how tomorrow's newspapers are covering the Belfast knife attack and its aftermath. Well, hello and good evening to you, Jenny, Ali. Welcome as well to both of you. So there is disorder on the streets of Belfast tonight after a 30-year-old Sudanese man was charged with attempted murder over yesterday's knife attack in the city. The victim, a man in his 40s, remains in hospital with serious eye, face and back injuries. As you can see, smoke rising from the streets of Belfast tonight, a number of properties now and earlier vehicles, including a bus, set alight this evening, with protesters also throwing stones at police. Earlier, police and political leaders had called for calm on the streets. Northern Ireland's Chief Constable had urged people not to be duped into violent disorder, asking them to allow the criminal justice process to take its course. He added, where there are any concerns about immigration, let's have those through a political debate. And tonight, the Police Service of Northern Ireland have issued a new statement saying that sporadic pockets of disorder have broken out in a number of locations across Northern Ireland this evening, including incidents in which a number of vehicles have been set on fire. We're urging everyone to remain calm, act responsibly and avoid any activity that could place themselves or others at risk. Officers are on the ground working alongside partner agencies, responding to incidents as they arise and helping to keep people safe. We are again appealing for calm and ask all voices of influence within local communities to encourage peaceful protest and discourage any involvement in violence or disorder. Well, let's head then to Belfast and bring in our correspondent Dan Whitehead, who is there for us tonight. Certainly, right at the start of this, Dan, we saw bins set on fire, then a bus. Now, from our aerial pictures, we've seen a house on fire, a retail space smoking with flats above it. You know, what is the sense from where you are of the atmosphere there this evening?
The sense is that the tension is building as the night goes on, and the sense is that there are pockets of violence erupting. We are on Lower Newton Isles Road in the east of the city, around a mile and a half away from the attack around 24 hours ago. You can see just down the road, if we look, this is where that bus was on fire an hour or so ago. That has now been put out. You can see next to us here the TSG. Now, this is the Tactical Support Group. Fire engine just coming through to another fire that's breaking out further down the road. But this, the TSG unit here, we think making just one arrest here. They have been driving up and down here quite aggressively, pushing quite a small crowd out of the way and dispersing them onto the side streets. And I think what we've been seeing is that the activity and some of the fires in the last half an hour or so have been breaking out on the side streets off what is this main road in the east of the city. That fire engine you can see turning into where the smoke is still rising. That was really billowing around 5 or 10 minutes ago. So look, it's a tense situation. Earlier on this evening, and I'm talking around about sort of 5:30, 6 o'clock, it was an eerie feeling right across Belfast. After the rush hour at around 6 o'clock, the streets emptied. The taxi that took me from the airport this afternoon said that the city is in a boiling point, were his words, and said that he'll be stopping work at around 6 o'clock. And indeed, many of the shops down here on the road have got posters on saying that they will be closing at 5 and not opening because of the situation. There has been a call for calm from the politicians here in Northern Ireland, from the politicians elsewhere in the UK, and of course from the police. That hasn't been heeded so far tonight. The hope is that these crowds don't grow any further. We just bring you a couple. Let's just have a little walk around. We've got to be a bit sensitive here. They are questioning a man to the left of us. You can see here the TSG units. These, of course, are brought in to really deal with unrest when it erupts here. And the PSNI have specific tactics that are used not elsewhere in the UK, so they're well versed at dealing with this. I think one of the struggles which potentially they're dealing with at the moment this evening is the fact that the violence is spread out, as I say, in pockets across the city, and that, of course, stretches resources and makes it even more difficult. Just lastly, you can see down towards the end, if we can push in a little bit, there is a crowd developing there. Now that crowd, you can see people, mainly people dressed in black. We've seen lots of people wearing balaclavas, hiding their faces. That area down there, just by the church spire, is just about where that bus was set on fire. We were just walking down there a few moments ago, completely charred remains of that bus there, and the wheelie bins still alight. So it appears this is, you know, we could call it the epicenter, but as I say, it is pockets of violence, and you can see the officers here tonight preparing potentially for more unrest.
Dan, thank you very much indeed. Well, also there, Conor Gillis, who's in Belfast too, and certainly the message, apart from the message of calm, was get home early, shut up shop. There is a sense that Belfast is a ghost town, Conor, you know, apart from those on the streets who are intent on disruption or protest.
Indeed, Anna, good evening. We began the evening in the same location that you have just been witnessing Dan at, where that bus was set on fire, where tensions erupted a number of hours ago. And we subsequently have been on a journey visiting various communities here in Northern Ireland to get a sense of the anger, to get a sense of the scene, and there is simmering tension here. The streets have been empty. The motorways at one point were closed off as masked protesters entered various parts of the road network. There is a smell of smoke wherever you travel here in Belfast this evening, and the reason we're standing here is because just around the corner a building has been set on fire, and at the foot of that building is an Arabic shop. The residents of the flats just above, that you can see just out of shot there, they have been evacuated as part of this process. Riot police have been deployed again to pockets of issues across the city here as well, and we've been having conversations with many locals, some of whom do not welcome the presence of the media here, but some have been more than happy to talk to us off camera. One man telling us in the last 10 minutes or so, unconfirmed it has to be said, that in one community, local people are stopping cars and checking nationalities of people. What happens next is unclear, but that's certainly some of the reports that we are hearing. Now, we are 10 minutes from, I suppose, where the epicentre of this unfolded last night, 24 hours ago, when those bloodied scenes of a man pinned to the street, where a knife was being plunged into his body, into his neck, into his head, into his back. He is still, tonight, the police tell us, receiving treatment in a serious condition in hospital here in Belfast. And we talk about the ghost town element of this. Well, we're slap bang in the centre of town here. And look, businesses, restaurants that would normally be full and open at this time of the night, well, they are completely closed. There are cordons in place where the emergency service activity is continuing to assess what is happening here. But it has been a day of commentating when it comes to the politicians as well. One senior politician calling this chilling, calling it medieval, a mutilation of a citizen, they say, of Belfast, an attempted slaughter, their words, as part of this, because that video, it has to be said, was extremely graphic, captured on camera in the middle of a residential street. Children were among those who'd gathered, a local resident attempting to bat off the attacker. Details have emerged about the suspect as part of this investigation today throughout the police intervention as well. We know that he is a Sudanese national. He made a journey from Sudan onto the continent of Europe in Paris. Then from Paris, he made his way over on a flight to Dublin. A bus journey then from Dublin up here to Belfast in 2023, where he claimed asylum. And we understand that he was given leave to remain here in the UK until at least 2028. Now, the police have been keen to stress that it is their job to conduct this investigation, and people should not be taking the law into their own hands. They say they have made this arrest, and tonight they have charged that individual. He is due to appear at Belfast Magistrates Court tomorrow morning. They also confirmed that there is no trace of that individual on the National Security Database as well, and they are not treating this as a terror attack. But as the hours go on, the tension continues to build here in the city. As we say, pockets of violence. This time last year, I was here in Northern Ireland covering the troubles in Ballymena. That was as a result of an attack on a young girl there by a foreign national, a major flare-up, riots on the streets, water cannon was deployed as part of the policing efforts there. I think the difference tonight here in Belfast is that clearly we're talking about a city rather than a town, and therefore the violence, the disorder hasn't been as concentrated and has been more spread out as a result. Look, the police are continuing their investigations. You can see it continuing here behind me, and they do have a long night ahead of them, Anna.
Yes, indeed. So, Connor, thank you very much indeed, keeping us posted there on the ground. The DUP's Gavin Robinson has just put out a statement on X. Violence and disorder is wrong and it is counterproductive. It serves no purpose other than the destruction of neighbourhoods and to turn the focus away from where it should be. Many of us have spoken out before to highlight the issues of concern, and we will continue to do so. If you are not prepared to make your views known peacefully and lawfully, then you are undermining the cause you are claiming to stand for. So let's bring in our police commentator, Graham Whettone, and that message going out loud and clear. It is your own communities you are destroying here, Graham.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, made this point earlier on as well. It is their own community that's going to be affected by this. Buses on fire, vehicles on fire, houses on fire. This is no longer a peaceful protest. It's now escalated into serious disorder, as was feared at the start of the night. Belfast is used to having this almost like an annual event around this time of year where the protests escalate into serious disorder. Sadly, we're now seeing this as darkness falls. The fear always was that this could escalate slightly with smaller but more concentrated and concerted efforts by certain individuals to just escalate this even further, as we are seeing. The police will be stretched tonight going across Belfast itself, dealing with pockets of disorder, but they have the resources. They are well used to dealing with serious disorder in Belfast. They have the tactics and the vehicles and the officers to deal with it, albeit they are, as every police force in the UK is, short of numbers.
Yes, let's just look at some of the pictures we've had in so far this evening, which is an escalation, despite the very specific use of language by the Assistant Chief Constable, Ryan Hannison, in the latest statement from the PSNI of sporadic pockets of disorder. One is a house that's on fire. Now, I mean, this is, when it starts to spread to streets like this, you're putting people out of their homes. And the other one was a retail space. There are flats above it as well. You know, clearly people have to be evacuated, or those flats have to be evacuated. And that's when it becomes no longer, you know, some pallets on fire, which we saw earlier, bins on fire, some vehicles on fire. This is now people's properties and their lives being challenged here.
Yeah, definitely. Lives at risk here by what we're seeing. Properties on fire, vehicles on fire, outside properties. So people's lives and livelihoods are definitely at risk here. This is where we're seeing it escalate. And the fear was, as darkness fell, we would see an escalation in disorder and violence with properties and vehicles being set on fire. Wait to see now what happens in the next hour. There's a number of views out on the streets in different pockets, and the police are experiencing serious disorder. The fire service are working hard to extinguish some of those fires, but they can't be all over the city. It is a large city and requires a significant number of resources to deal with these incidents we're seeing. The bus you can see now, that's from much earlier on, that's one of the first things we saw, was a bus next to, I think, like a residential block of flats. That burnt through, as we saw earlier on. That was set alight. You could see the bins being literally put against the bus to catch the bus on fire. We saw individuals moving those bins up against the bus so it would actually ignite the bus. And that bus, I think, is burnt almost to a cinder. That was much earlier on, about 2 or 3 hours ago.
Stretching, no doubt, for the police. Graham, stay there. Let's bring in Alison Morris, crime correspondent for the Belfast Telegraph. I mean, this will be depressing, won't it, for those political leaders who've called for calm. You know, how stretched will the police service of Northern Ireland be, do you think, as we watch these scenes this evening?
Well, yeah, and I'm reporting from a car because I've basically been in North Belfast where there's roads closed. There's a huge police presence in that area as well. Your correspondents are in East Belfast. We've seen disorder in South Belfast. And ironically, I was at a policing conference last night with the Chief Constable and Deputy Chief Constable when they were talking about public confidence in new policing in a post-peace process Belfast. And within an hour, we left that conference at about 9 o'clock, and we know this horrific attack happened at 10:30. Police are really, really stretched because the people who organised these protests made sure that geographically they put them in all different parts of not just Belfast but across Northern Ireland, and that meant that police resources would have to be moved around from place to place. And as we've seen, it's now changed to blocking roads, which was what was happening earlier on this evening, to attacking properties of homes where people are pointing out where foreign nationals live. And, you know, we know that the man who was attacked is recovering in hospital. He has very serious life-changing, life-altering injuries. And ironically, it will be foreign nationals who will be at his bedside looking after him. People who I hope have a home to go home to when they finish their shift this evening.
Alison, very good to talk to you. Perhaps we'll talk again later. And obviously, you know, good luck in your car and trying to make your way around.
I moved somewhere.
Around the city.
I moved somewhere quiet, but there's just blue flashing lights everywhere. So.
Well, that's it. And as you suggested, this geographic spread of disorder makes it very difficult for people, doesn't it? Let's bring in the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Baroness Arlene Foster, who's well known to this show quite clearly. Arlene, the latest statement from police, we're again appealing for calm and ask all voices of influence within local communities to encourage peaceful protest and discourage any involvement in violence or disorder. So what is your message tonight?
Well, it's with great sadness. I've been watching the pictures from Belfast, from Portadown, from Ballyclare, where violence is happening right across Northern Ireland. And as the leader of the DUP, Gavin Robinson, has said in a tweet that you referenced just a few moments ago, this is not only wrong, of course, we condemn the violence completely, but it's entirely counterproductive. I mean, if these people are genuinely concerned about immigration issues, this takes the whole spotlight away from that issue and onto the violence in their own communities. They're destroying their own communities. I know the Newtownards Road very well, and they're a working class community. They have it tough, and now they have this violence going on, buses being burnt, houses being burnt. My goodness, how absolutely dreadful. And young people are going to end up with criminal records again. And the people that are causing this violence and moving the protest from a peaceful protest to a violent protest have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. So, of course, I call for calm, not just calm, but I call for young people to go home. The peaceful protest has now turned into violence. And unless you want a criminal record, you need to get home right now. I have to say as well, I listened to the Chief Constable today, a Chief Constable of a police force who finds itself often in the middle of everything, having to try to hold the line, having to try to keep order on our streets. And he's right to say that immigration issues are not a matter for the police. They are a matter for the politicians. And the politicians really have to not just listen and acknowledge the concerns that there are right across Northern Ireland, and indeed the whole of the UK and Ireland at the moment, but they have to then take action to do something about these dreadful, dreadful crimes. I cannot even comprehend what happened in North Belfast last night when I hear the injuries that this gentleman has had and who's in hospital. And of course, we think particularly of him and his family tonight. But the police are in the middle of all of this, and they're the guys that are trying to hold the line, and it's very, very difficult, Hannah.
And in terms of, you know, the cause of the protest, the incident last night, but general frustration too. There was a DUP urgent question, which John Craig talked about earlier, asking for uncontrolled immigration to end. Another unionist MP talking about an alien culture. So what is the immigration pressure on Northern Ireland now? And is there concern about the porous border with Ireland?
Well, there has been concern about that porous border for some time now, and it's in the public domain how this gentleman actually travelled. That's my phone going off. How this gentleman actually travelled across from Sudan, across Europe, into Dublin, and then on a bus up to Belfast without any checks taking place. And I think that is a matter of grave concern. So what people want to see happening now is a way in which we deal with our common travel area, which we have here and which has worked very well for people right across the UK and Ireland for many, many years now. But it's allowing a back door into the UK through the Republic of Ireland. And therefore, that needs to be tackled. And it'll only be tackled when both governments are in a place where they can deal with it. And I think that's what people want to see happening.
Lots of questions will be about leave to remain, about indefinite leave to remain. It's become something of a real political battleground. You know, what is your feeling about indefinite leave to remain and the idea that it's extended beyond the current 5 years? Do you have a strong view that something needs to be done about that?
Well, I think the whole immigration situation has to be tackled now, and we do need to have a mature conversation about the European Convention on Human Rights. Anytime the ECHR is mentioned, people go into a flurry, particularly when it's mentioned in the House of Lords, and Labour ministers will say, under no circumstances will we leave the ECHR. Well, I don't think that's where the people of the UK are at anymore. They want a discussion about this. They want to know what the consequences are of leaving, of staying, and they want a mature debate about it and not just dismissed out of hand. And it's long past the time when people who raise issues around immigration are dismissed as racists. I think it's so disrespectful. They need to be listened to. They need to be acknowledged. These are people with genuine concerns, Anna. These are not racists. And I thought Mervyn Gibson, who's a senior member of the Orange Institution here in Northern Ireland, made a very good point earlier today. And it's something that actually Alison referenced. This isn't about race. It's about immigration. There's a lot of people working in the NHS here in Northern Ireland who are from different race than I am, and we want them to be here and we want them to be working here in the NHS. What I'm saying to you is untrammeled immigration is the issue, and that's what we need to focus on.
Arlene, good to talk to you. Obviously, I know you'll be watching the pictures as we will. Thank you very much indeed. Well, John Craig has joined us here, our chief political correspondent. But let's get a thought first from Jenny Kleeman and Ali Mirage as we see the flashing blue lights and the fires on the streets of Belfast. And as we hear from Arlene, it's not just in Belfast.
No, it's not in Belfast. It's spreading now, and clearly. The first thoughts go to the victim of this absolutely heinous crime, and the perpetrator of this should be brought to justice in due course. But clearly, we need calm heads to prevail. There are some very, very serious issues underlying all of this that need to be examined carefully, as Arlene Foster was saying. People should not use this as an excuse right now to inflame a powder keg situation.
Jenny.
Well, I would just say these are not protests. These are small pockets of riots that help absolutely no one. And the reason why this is happening is because of the internet, is because this crime was filmed and posted online, and is because several members of the far right salivate when things like this happen and use it as an excuse to exploit and stoke up division. That's precisely what's happened. You have Tommy Robinson putting out lists of locations for people to go out and cause trouble, amplified by Elon Musk. And this is the sad state of affairs that we're in, that things are moving so fast that we think we know what all of this is about, or people on the street think they know what they're getting angry about, when so few facts are actually known about what happens. And it's a dismal state of affairs.
And unusually, for now, we do know where the alleged perpetrator came from, the travel route, because before that was hidden information. Yeah. And after the Southport attacks, where the void was filled with speculation and falsehood, then the policy has changed on that. And, John, that raises all sorts of questions for the politicians, doesn't it, that this information we now know? And
that confusion or doubts and speculation about the circumstances of the accused led to a lot of frustration in the House of Commons today. There was an urgent question from Gavin Robinson, who leads the Democratic Unionists in the House of Commons. And it was he, actually, who said right away in his question, the time for uncontrolled immigration must end. And that phrase you mentioned just now, alien culture, that was Jim Allister, who's, I would call him a hard-line unionist. I hope that's not unfair. But he was pretty outspoken. Yes. And it was 20 to 5 this afternoon before the Home Office actually released details of the background of the accused person and the route that you've talked about just now. And of course, it's really thrown wide open this whole debate about immigration policy. Nigel Farage, who last week, of course, was bitterly criticised, not least by the Prime Minister, for talking about pure cold rage over the Henry Novak case. Today he was talking about indefinite leave to remain being dished out like Smarties, he said.
Well, leave to remain, he said.
Leave to remain, I beg your pardon, yeah.
Which obviously then leads to somebody after 5 years being able to stay permanently in this country, which is something that the politicians are now looking at.
They are. And I've taken the trouble to study all three policies. I've got, so on Labour, for example, that is, it's 5 to 10 years. Tories quite similar, and Reform more radical again, getting rid of the Boris wave, as they put it, much more. For example, a Reform said indefinite leave to remain will be abolished. No new awards granted, existing ones rescinded. Andy Burnham, interestingly, who would like to be Prime Minister, has backed Shabana Mahmood's proposals.
OK, John, we'll get more on that, but there is more breaking news to bring you. That involves the United States, which has launched strikes against Iranian targets, 5 p.m. US time, 10 p.m. UK time. This after President Trump accused Iran of shooting down a US Apache helicopter patrolling the Strait of Hormuz. Let's bring in our US correspondent, David Blevins. The president making clear he would retaliate. David.
Yes, Anna, let me bring you the very latest. We're hearing from US Central Command. They say forces began launching what they are describing as self-defense strikes against Iran at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, so about 25 minutes ago. They say that was at the direction of the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump, in response to yesterday's downing of a US Army Apache helicopter. They're choosing their words very carefully. They say this mission is a proportional response to unjustified Iranian aggression, and in many ways that echoes what President Trump himself had to say earlier. It was the president who confirmed that this Apache helicopter had been downed, we understand, off the coast of Oman. The two members of the crew were rescued by an unmanned drone boat. That's a first for the US military. But the president's response was notable for various reasons. He talked about the necessity of having to respond to this attack. It's very unusual for him to give Iran advance notice that he was planning to attack. In fact, in the past, he said it would be stupid to do that. And of course, this attack comes just 24 hours after the president told us they could be just 2 to 3 days away from a deal between the United States and Iran to bring this to an end. Of course, he has been saying that for 2 to 3 months. And my read of all of that, I suppose, is that the president has felt obliged to respond, but he didn't want to derail the negotiations completely, to dash any hope that there may be of a breakthrough that would bring this war to an end. And that's why they are describing this as self-defense and proportional. They're effectively repeating what they did last month in response to the Iranians attacking a US ship when the president called America's retaliation a love tap.
Yes, indeed. We remember that well. David, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. And the US certainly claiming the Apache was brought down by a one-way Iranian track drone. Iran's Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, didn't directly address the incident, but said foreign forces in the region risk being involved in accidents or crossfire. But David Blevins bringing us that news then that US Central Command have confirmed they've begun launching what they call self-defense strikes against Iran at 10 p.m. UK time today at the Commander-in-Chief's direction following the downing of a US Army Apache helicopter. We will follow that and see what more details we learn. In the meantime, let us return to our correspondent Dan Whitehead, who is covering what is happening in Belfast for us this evening. Dan.
Yeah, we're still on Newtonards Road in the east of Belfast, where you can see that the TSG, the Tactical Support Group of the PSNI, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, have been deployed here. You know, what's unfolded here over the last few hours, this really was the sort of flashpoint where that bus we saw was set on fire a couple of hours ago, further down the road behind us. In the last hour or so, we've seen smoke billowing from a property, 2 ambulances and 2 fire crews heading down there. One of those ambulances has left. We can't get any closer at the moment. I've just been chatting to Bronze Command here amongst the TSG. They won't give us an update yet, but they say they are grouping. I think what is happening is that they are grouping ahead of nightfall properly falling. There's still a bit of daylight at the minute. This situation will get much more difficult for police across this city once nightfall really sets in. what we have been seeing across Belfast are pockets of violence. It hasn't just been the location that we've been at here, where we have witnessed one arrest, numerous fires. On Shanklin Road, elsewhere in the city, fires have been breaking out. We've seen these vehicles deployed. It looks like, at the moment, there are pockets of violence erupting across the city. This is, of course, not the calm that the politicians and the police had been hoping for. But at the moment here, albeit there is, if we just have a look around, you can just see how empty this Clode Road is. It's difficult to see at the moment, but there are crowds gathering down towards past those traffic lights. That's where the bus was. But at the minute, it seems to have settled. There are mainly young people just simply coming out, having a look at what is going on. But there is an anticipation in the air. There is tension in the air. And clearly the police here at the other end, other parts of the city, are bracing themselves what is looking like could be a very long night, just 24 hours on or so since that horrific attack about 1.5 miles away from here. And look, this may not end this evening. That 30-year-old man who has been arrested and charged.
Yes, I think we've lost the connection there to Dan Whitehead, who is making the point that 24 hours have now passed since that attack, which the Prime Minister described as sickening. Pictures from earlier there, then, of a house on fire. Let's bring in Conor Gillis, and certainly people we've spoken to tonight are suggesting almost a deliberate effort to make this geographically spread, both across Belfast and other parts of Northern Ireland, which makes it harder, does it not, for the police service to handle?
Certainly does in terms of those policing efforts, but so far the PSNI seem to be across it, seem to be tackling the hotspots and tackling the flare-ups as and when they happen. There has been widespread condemnation for the violence and the disorder that this corner of Northern Ireland has witnessed this evening. And we have been on a journey, starting where you've just been witnessing Dan there, where the bus was set on fire in the early part of the evening, sending a huge plume of smoke all across the city that we could see from miles away. And we've been journeying through various communities where there have been flare-ups and where there have been fires on those streets. And we have ended here where riot police are just at the corner of the street there, as you can just see, because the building just to your left-hand side, well, it is a block of flats, but at the foot of that building is an Arabic food shop, and we could see smoke coming from there, and a number of large group of masked individuals wearing balaclavas had gathered in an attempt to make their presence, make their protest felt. Certainly we were not welcome there. The presence of the media, the presence of anyone attempting to take photos or videos was not a welcome sight whatsoever. So that's why we have moved to the position that we are in now. And yes, there have been very many people who've been refusing to engage with us. We've been trying to understand the feeling here in the city following those horrifying events 24 hours ago. But there have been some people who've been willing to engage with us off camera, away from the glare of the camera. And unconfirmed, but someone just mentioned to us about 10 minutes ago that in another community just up the road from where we are just now, locals there are stopping cars, checkpoints essentially set up to try and see who the occupants are inside those vehicles and if they are foreign nationals at all. And that stretches back to the scenes that we witnessed here on the streets of this city last night that were captured on camera, broadcast around the world for all to see, that drew comments from the likes of Elon Musk and Tommy Robinson in terms of some far-right figures, because there was a man pinned to the ground and a knife being bludgeoned into his neck, his back, his face. He remains in a serious condition this evening, and that is essentially where the crux of this protest that has flared up in pockets across the city, because we know that he is a Sudanese national. He made a journey from Sudan to Paris a number of years ago, then from Paris on a flight over to Dublin, and then a bus journey in 2023 from Dublin here to Belfast, where he claimed asylum, and he was granted leave to remain with a visa extending until 2028, we understand. He's due at Belfast Magistrates Court And as with all protests and violence, clearly when the weather takes a turn, as you can see is happening right now, people do tend to get off the streets. The question will be, will that happen? Certainly the police are preparing for a long night ahead, Anna.
Connor, thank you very much indeed. Bring us the latest from there. We're just going to return to the other breaking news. We brought you a short time ago. The US Central Command confirmed that America is now targeting parts of Iran. This after the Americans claimed the Iranians brought down an Apache helicopter. Iranian state TV and the Fars news agency now beginning to suggest where those bombs are falling. For example, Iran's Fars says explosions have been heard in the eastern areas of Hormozgan, also suggesting that Keshem has been attacked, and also suggesting now that a projectile hit was confirmed in Sirik on the southern coast. Certainly, Keshem is right north of Oman in the Strait of Hormuz, and certainly from US Central Command, they're suggesting these are defensive strikes, no doubt to bring down missile or drone capabilities in the area. So Iran now beginning to report the areas that are being struck by the Americans, and this, of course, comes after Iran fired missiles at Israel. Israel retaliated. Now the Americans, having pleaded with Israel not to retaliate, are themselves retaliating. We'll keep abreast of that and bring you more. Ali Mirage, Jenny Kleeman, John Craig are here with us as we watch the situation in Belfast and across Northern Ireland, Ali. But, you know, this really does bring a sharp focus, does it not, to immigration policy in the UK? And, you know, the sense that although the claim is that this is thuggery, rioting, you know, unnecessary violence in Northern Ireland, that, you know, the sense that the British populace in places has reached what, do you think?
I think it's beyond breaking point, actually. And I think it's a powder keg that, frankly, has been waiting to explode and is now exploding. And it's no surprise to me at all. I think we need to make a distinction between legal immigration and asylum. Now, in this particular case, we're going to find out all the details in due course. But what we are being told is that this individual went on a plane from Paris to Dublin and then took a bus into Belfast and then claimed asylum. Now, how on earth did that actually happen, and how would you stop that happening again? I, at the moment, quite frankly, do not have faith in the asylum process in this country at all. A lot of asylum claims are being processed and allowed to go through. The people who are processing them are clearly under a lot of pressure. They're very short-staffed. I'm not sure I have any confidence whatsoever right now in the asylum system whatsoever. And the problem with all of this is people need to feel they've got faith in the system and they feel safe. Arlene Foster talks about the European Convention on Human Rights. People are fed up of judges from Brussels coming out in the middle of the night in pyjamas saying that you can't be deported. I mean, as simple as that. This is now reaching a point where, you know, we can sit in our studios and debate all of this stuff. We can see what's happening on the streets. There should be no excuse for that. But unfortunately, it's not just people who go out rioting that we need to worry about. It's people actually who are going on Unite the Kingdom rallies at the moment, right? Who are ordinary, many of them, ordinary British folk who have just had enough.
Jenny, you were sighing through a lot of that.
I just feel like we do not know what grounds for asylum that he was granted this 5-year asylum. We know that there was no reason for concern flagged about him, and I feel that we are playing into the hands of people who have a financial interest in stoking up hatred by getting people on online platforms to engage, by responding in this way so quickly to something that we don't know the details of all of this. This is a calculated thing by people who have political capital and actual money to be made out of our anger about immigration. We don't even know what we're getting angry about, actually, at this point, because so few details have been released. This man has been charged, but we don't know really anything at all about this, apart from the video and apart from the fact that a lot of people on the far right have been putting out calls for the kind of violence that we're now seeing on our screens.
Yeah, the difficulty is a nation like Sudan, for example, the death toll in the last 3 years is estimated to be between 150,000 to 400,000. Yeah. You know, the latter figure before the massacre at El Fasher, which was surrounded with a siege which starved people. You've got massacres that are visible from space, even before that, because the timeline of this will be interesting. There was a revolution in 2019, a military coup in 2021. How you turn down people who've come from war-torn parts of the world becomes increasingly difficult and wrought with legal challenge. And you say, you know, people are being let through. Certainly we know, for example, Nigel Farage has used the phraseology that leave for remain has been handed out like Smarties. But how you stop when you know a nation is in crisis like Sudan, then it becomes very difficult.
Absolutely, and Jenny's completely correct in that there are people out there who are stoking division, Elon Musk being one of them, Tommy Robinson being another. However, they are tapping into a sense of anger, frustration and helplessness now that, look, we should wait for all the details to come out. Absolutely correct. What we do know is that this guy came from Sudan, and what we also know, based on what you've just told us, Anna, is that there'll be a lot of very, very emotionally disturbed people coming from a war zone. Why wouldn't they be? Anyone would be. And the first duty of any government is to protect its own citizens. Yes, we have an absolute obligation to help others where we can. Of course we do. And we've got a long history of doing it, going back centuries and generations. However, at the moment, people feel that this is totally being abused, and this is the latest case. And it comes right on the back of another situation, which was not asylum-related, of course, in relation to Henry Novak. But one's got to recognise at the moment that we are in an environment where people feel helpless and desperate, and this is now coming at a very, very challenging time.
OK. Just more breaking news on Iran. Explosions have now been heard also in Bandar Abbas, which is, again, a town on the Strait of Hormuz in Iran, very near Keshem, which is part of an island as well, near Larak Island. You'll probably have heard news about that. So we're keeping an eye on the explosions now in Iran. But let's just show you the newspapers and how they are responding to what we're seeing across Northern Ireland now. First of all, the Eye leading with the plea for calm from police as vehicles are set alight in Belfast. It's also on the front page of The Guardian, which describes the scenes in Northern Ireland as an eruption of violence. It's also the lead story for the Daily Mail, which details how the suspect arrived in the UK. The Telegraph goes with that same line as well. Entering the UK via a loophole is their suggestion. And the Express carries praise for the men who stepped in to help the victim during the attack. Not sure we have that paper. Well, the Times describes the attack that sparked the unrest on its front page. John Craig is here. I mean, what do politicians do now, John?
Well, they obviously argue about it because, and at PMQs tomorrow, so I'm sure this will, if not dominate, certainly come up. Just on the dates involved and those headlines talking about coming in through the back door, what we heard from the Home Office late this afternoon, he's a Sudanese national with leave to remain till 2028. He entered the UK in 2023, granted refugee status the same year. He claims to have entered via the Common Travel Area. Now, that's why the papers are talking about the back door, because the Common Travel Area, it's an arrangement between the UK, Jersey, Guernsey, the Isle of Man and Ireland, and it means that British and Irish citizens can move freely and reside in either jurisdiction, rights and privileges, right to work, study and vote. I should just point out, 2023, of course, the Home Secretary was one Suella Braverman, now of Reform, and the Minister of State for Immigration was Robert Jenrick. And we dug out a question answered by Robert Jenrick. The UK has a proud history of supporting refugees. The UK is proud to have welcomed Sudanese nationals. Robert Jenrick, 2023.
There's a statement now from Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill, First Minister of Northern Ireland, in which she says groups of masked men burning families out of their homes is nothing less than disgusting cowardice. This has nothing to do with community. This is outright thuggery. The attack in North Belfast was heinous and wrong, but there are dangerous attempts to exploit that, to target and attack innocent people who are simply trying to live, work and raise their families here. Racism, intimidation and violence are wrong wherever they occur. There can be no excuse and no justification for these attacks tonight. No one wants to see this on our streets. And I again again appeal for calm? I mean, you would agree with, you know, quite a lot of that, the sense that there's an agitation to have a response like this from social media and elsewhere.
It is ridiculous. You had Tommy Robinson online urging for all sides of Ireland to come together, unionists and loyalists to come together. Oh, OK, they will do, because Tommy Robinson has told them to unite over this particular issue. People who have absolutely no interest in the welfare of people in Northern Ireland suddenly focusing their attention on this part of the world tonight. And we know, I mean, it's practically exactly a year since the riots in Ballymena. We know that these things happen. They happened a year ago in Ballymena for similar reasons, tensions over foreign nationals linked to crimes. But absolutely nobody gains from all of this. And I feel like, you know, there may be questions to be had about immigration and the immigration system, but they have to be absolutely separated from what we're seeing on our screens right now, and also from this attempted murder, which we don't know anything about any of the details. If we want to sort this problem out, we have to do it with a cool head.
Yes, certainly there were protests in Southampton as well. Protesters stood outside a Southampton hotel that had housed asylum seekers, holding signs that said illegal migration is destroying our civilization. You know, that, of course, came after the recent sentencing of a man who killed a university student with a knife, led to violent clashes with police last week, as we know, you know, the Novak case, John. But this is difficult, isn't it? Because do politicians decide to become tougher and tougher about asylum seekers and immigration, both legal and illegal, in terms of dependents who come, because they sense that that is where the mood music goes, despite the fact that large swathes of British society needs migration in some element, for example, care, social care and the NHS, in order to exist and survive and thrive?
Well, it's certainly all the political parties seem to be toughening their language. And Andy Burnham, who had hopes to succeed Sir Keir Starmer, gave a local radio interview in which he was saying the government needs to get a grip, in his words, on this. That word medieval, by the way, on the front of the Times, that was used by Gavin Robinson, the DUP leader in Westminster, who asked the urgent question. But Andy Robinson was talking in a local radio interview. He said, I used to be an immigration minister in the Blair government, and he said, I used to oversee returns. We did get a grip, but the government needs to go further and get a grip now. He's backing... at one point, Mr Burnham was calling on ministers to scrap a restriction on immigrants claiming benefits, but he's changed his mind about that now. He's toughened his position. So it just shows how a lot of the politicians are moving towards a tougher position.
John, they're moving, right? I stood for Parliament in 2001 and 2005. In 2005, Michael Howard, who was my party leader at the time, I'm not involved with the Tories anymore. However, at the time, they put out posters everywhere saying, and you'll remember this, it's not racist to talk about limits on immigration. What was the net migration number then? 150,000, and people were having aneurysms about it. Then it went up to 900,000 under Boris, who had told us that we would control this nonsense by coming out of the EU. And then we're wondering why people are angry? I mean, honestly...
It's gone down again.
It's gone down again. It has, because now finally Shabana Mahmood gets it. And is Shabana Mahmood even a leadership contender of the Labour Party? No, because they all think she's too right-wing. And then we're actually genuinely saying that leading politicians get it. They still don't get it.
Yes, but the numbers have gone down significantly, and yet you're having these kinds of riots, and you're having this dominating the discourse because it is politically expedient for certain people on the far right to perpetuate
Jenny,
this.
I completely agree with you. Absolutely, you're right about this. However, if you have a situation where someone arrives in Paris and then ends up in Belfast claiming asylum, some people in Britain, right, who are sitting at their home at the moment, right, drinking their evening tea, might be thinking, hang on a second, we're mugs here. If you're genuinely fleeing persecution, and yes, we've all heard the stories about, yes, you can go to any country you want under the European Convention on Human Rights and under protocols, you have a right to go anywhere you want. People are not buying this. They're fed up of it. If you're genuinely claiming fleeing persecution, firstly, you don't leave without your family, right? You take your family with you. And secondly, claim asylum in the first country you end up in. Don't wait to engineer your way to Belfast.
I mean, that often is not the case. That
it often is the case.
That they send the oldest son to go and see if they can find settled status somewhere and then bring the family. That is why you see
if you're genuinely fleeing persecution,
men.
Genuinely, Anna, if you're genuinely fleeing persecution, would you leave your family behind? I wouldn't.
We don't know the details of this. He might have family in Belfast. He might have family in the UK, which would lead him to want to make it to his family here. This is the whole point about this, is that we don't know the details of this case, and yet we're using this to get angry because this is a rage that has been
It's not an isolated case, though. That's the problem. These cases occur and they perpetually come up, and people are now drawing their own conclusions. And you're right, you're absolutely right that we don't want unrest on the streets. But we've got to the point now in this country where people feel that the Michael has been extracted for too long. We've been talking about this stuff since 2005, for heaven's sake. It's now 2026, and we're still having the conversation about getting tough. It's a joke.
I might point out, of course, that under Michael Howard, in 2005, the Labour Party won, I think it was a majority of 64. Yes. And, of course, in 2001, when you were also a candidate,
yes.
Labour had a majority of about 170.
I know. It's a good point.
You didn't feel you wanted to try again?
Certainly not. I mean...
And it's Reform who are now talking about the Boris wave and attacking that.
That's right. That's right, too.
Well, we see the fire engines on the streets of Belfast. Clearly, it's absolutely critical to try to get some of these fires under control, especially when they are properties. Just got a statement now from the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Hilary Benn. People have been rightly shocked, he says, by the brutal attack in North Belfast, but the police must be allowed to do their job so the law can take its course. The scenes of disorder we have witnessed in some parts of Northern Ireland this evening are only damaging communities and putting innocent lives at risk. There is no justification at all for this type of thuggery. I echo the call from the PSNI for this violence to end now. So let's bring in Graham Whettone, our police commentator. You know, as we look at this emergency response with, you know, obviously, clearly the fire service desperate to put out some of these fires, but it is sporadic, it is widespread, it is difficult, therefore, Graham, to tackle.
Yeah, it's exceptionally difficult, and obviously the fire service need a safe environment to work, so they don't normally deploy into areas that the police haven't cleared them already, because we don't want to deploy them. And again, this is a dangerous night for all 999 services, and they're really not the enemy here, but they're the ones now between the people that are causing this disorder, setting fire to properties and vehicles, and other members of the public, other members of the community. So the 999 services are at risk here. People have right to ask it to stop, but I fear this is going to continue for some time yet. There's an element on the streets. Belfast has a history of serious disorder around this time of year anyway, so we're coming into the marching season. There's been a history of serious disorder this time of year. I think this is now just being used as a catalyst for almost what happens regularly in Belfast. We've gone beyond the immigration stuff now. This is just the usual people coming out the streets and using this as an excuse to cause serious disorder.
Yeah, we see powerful lights, torches down on the ground now. Presumably, you know, they're trying to evacuate buildings in the vicinity of fires and get people to safety.
Yeah, that'll be the priority for the fire service. Once the police have made the area safe for them to come in and start extinguishing the fires, is start checking the premises and removing people that are at risk. And as you've just mentioned, people's homes and properties, etc. Those fires can spread into other adjoining properties, so you put a number of people, lives are at risk with this. This is exceptionally dangerous situations. The police and the fire service and the paramedics are trying to deal with a number of incidents across the city centre. Makes it an exceptionally challenging evening.
Indeed so. And we go back to what Michelle O'Neill, Northern Ireland's First Minister, has said this evening. Groups of masked men burning families out of their homes is nothing less than disgusting cowardice, Jenny.
Absolutely, and particularly, you know, when you've got the houses where foreign nationals are assumed to be living. Your correspondent from the Belfast Telegraph pointing out that the man whose life was attempted, well, the attempt was made on his life yesterday, is probably being treated in a hospital by a foreign national. This just achieves absolutely nothing at all. And I think you know, the point is true. These are just people out on the street. They just want a ruck. They don't care about about immigration or making a point at all. They just want to be thugs.
This is not the sectarian violence that we've known in Northern Ireland over the years, Protestants versus Catholics. This seems to be people targeting Asian shops and so on.
Well, indeed so, and yet, because of that experience, the emergency services are well practised at this. Already we've seen, for example, the armoured Land Rovers in use, pushing through in the area of the Shankill Road, pushing barricades and fires out of the way. This scene earlier looks like youths, for want of a better word, had gone into a builder's yard, climbing over the fence and then pushing material into the street and then setting it on fire. That's the sort of thuggery that we've heard described by the politicians in Northern Ireland tonight, Ali.
It's appalling. I mean, there's no excuse for that kind of thuggery, and there's no excuse for anyone to be scared about being torched in their own home. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous, disgusting behaviour. I mean, we can believe two things at the same time, that this is totally outrageous behaviour, totally unforgivable, and that there is serious concern about the asylum system in this country and immigration more widely. I think both of those can be true at the same time. Yes, we should wait for all the details of the case. The problem is, we're living in a social media world where people don't wait. They draw their conclusions very quickly. I'm not saying that that's a right thing to do, but when there's a whole body of evidence that's been built up over time, when people are frustrated about a system that's being seen to be perpetually failing them, it doesn't take much. And clearly you get this kind of unrest, which is absolutely outrageous. But I'm angry. I'm angry about it. By the way, I will say this. I've got to actually say that these bystanders who got involved, they are heroes. And I'll tell you why they're heroes. Because I am sick and tired of the bystander society. People going through the tube gates and all the rest, and no one doing anything. They actually stuck up.
Ali, Jenny, John, more from you in just a moment as we cover what's happening in Belfast.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back.
Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to warn.
I'm just going to put some body armor on.
I'm Yalda Hakim.
Tonight on The Wrap, disorder in Belfast as a 30-year-old Sudanese man is charged with attempted murder over a stabbing attack. Northern Ireland's First Minister brands tonight's violence disgusting cowardice and echoes calls from the police for calm.
Please, please, let the PSNI, let the police do their job. Unfettered and undistracted by wider concerns there may be about disorder.
Also tonight, in the last hour, the United States strikes Iranian targets around the Strait of Hormuz after President Trump blames Iran for shooting down a US Apache helicopter. Well, we discuss the day's biggest stories with Jenny Kleeman, Ali Miraj, and as well our correspondent John Craig. Plus, we'll take a first look at how tomorrow's newspapers are covering the Belfast knife attack and its aftermath. Well, hello, good evening to you, Jenny, Ali and John too. Thanks for joining us as well. So there is disorder on the streets of Belfast tonight after a 30-year-old Sudanese man was charged with attempted murder over yesterday's knife attack in the city. The victim, a man in his 40s, remains in hospital with serious eye, face and back injuries. So a number of properties and vehicles, including a bus, have been set alight tonight, with protesters also throwing stones at police. Earlier, police and political leaders had called for calm on the streets. Northern Ireland's Chief Constable saying, where there are any concerns about immigration, let's have those through a political debate. And tonight, Northern Ireland's First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, has criticised the damage being caused by tonight's protests, saying groups of masked men burning families out of their homes is nothing less than disgusting cowardice. This has nothing to do with community. This is outright thuggery. The attack in North Belfast was heinous and wrong, but there are dangerous attempts to exploit that to target and attack innocent people who are simply trying to live, work and raise their families here. Racism, intimidation and violence are wrong wherever they occur. So let's just show you the live pictures then, shall we? As you can see, lines of police on standby. There have been what they described as sporadic outbursts of violence spread across not just parts of Belfast, but other parts of Northern Ireland. A very difficult night, Jenny, for the police and the emergency services to tackle.
Absolutely. Although they are experienced in this part of the world, in Northern Ireland and in Belfast in particular, sporadic pockets of violence setting things alight. This is not a protest. This is rioting. We were seeing when we were talking to the Sky correspondents in Belfast earlier that it was raining, but that doesn't seem to have made people go home just at this point. But you have buses on fire, properties on fire, and nobody wins in all of this. There's no political point being made. There is, you have correspondents saying that the people who are causing this damage don't want it filmed, don't want to be on camera. Well, protesters tend to want their messages to get out there. So, don't be fooled. This is not a process. This is just thuggery and violence and an excuse for idiots to run amok.
Yes, the DUP leader as well, Gavin Robinson, has also said violence and disorder is wrong. It is counterproductive. It serves no purpose other than the destruction of neighbourhoods and to turn the focus away from where it should be. Ali, your thoughts?
Look, there is absolutely no excuse for thuggery whatsoever. Yes, tensions are running high. Yes, people are concerned about the asylum system and how this individual came to be in Belfast and to actually engage in such an act, and we're going to find all of that out in due course. So I do understand the frustration and the anger, but yes, of course, calm heads need to prevail. You can't have people being threatened in their own homes and buses being set alight.
Yeah, certainly the Assistant Chief Constable of Northern Ireland, Ryan Henderson, who gave a news conference earlier declaring, all of what we're seeing in the last more than 24 hours now, a critical incident, said he understands that last night's attempted murder will leave people feeling a range of emotions from fear to anger. But I appeal for calm and the safety of all of our communities in response to this. Such was the concern, John, of the police. But clearly, we have seen the smoke, we've seen the flames. We've seen the disorder on the streets of Northern Ireland again.
There were appeals in Parliament led by Hilary Benn, the Northern Ireland Secretary, who was answering an urgent question from Gavin Robinson, who leads the DUP in the Commons, for calm. But again, it's been ignored. Just a thought on what some of the papers are saying tonight about a loophole and the accused getting in by the back door. Late this afternoon, it was just before 5 o'clock, the Home Office said that the individual was a Sudanese national with leave to remain in the UK till 2028. He entered in the UK in 2023 and was granted refugee status the same year. The individual claims to have entered the UK via the common travel area. And that's the reason why the papers are talking about coming in through the back door. Now, the common travel area, it's an arrangement between the UK, Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man and Ireland. Predates the British and Irish joining the EU, doesn't depend on it. But it means that British and Irish citizens can move freely and live in either jurisdiction, enjoy rights, privileges, right to work, study and vote in certain elections and so on. Get benefits and health services as well. So you could argue that's by the back door, but it's an arrangement that's been going for years and years and years.
Yes, John, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's just bring in our police commentator, Graham Wetton, who's watching these pictures. And certainly we've seen the fire service now brought in. Graham, you were saying earlier that they need to wait until the streets are safe for them to do so. But clearly they want to put out these fires, which are in people's homes now from the pictures.
Yeah, that's correct. What normally happens is the fire service will wait until the police can actually either escort them in or say an area is safe for them to go into. So we've seen fires burning sporadically across different parts of the city throughout the last couple of hours. They're now on scene, the fire service, and dealing with this. But as I said before, the 999 services are now between these people that are just carrying out wanton acts of violence and the disorder we're seeing. So it's the emergency services now bearing the brunt of all this. Calm was asked for, it hasn't been heeded. This has now gone beyond the peaceful protest, any form of protest. It's just outright serious wanton violence. And it's going to be difficult for the police service in Northern Ireland to get a grip of every single incident because it is escalating across the city. There are sporadic areas where disorder is breaking out and they need to move their resources around so they can quell those and bring it back to normality.
And what's your feeling about whether, you know, the sporadic and geographically spread nature of these protests was deliberate, in fact, to make it difficult to tackle?
Yeah, that's a possibility. It's possible that groups have almost like coordinated or organised themselves to be in different parts of Belfast so they can actually spread the resources fairly thin, make it even more challenging for the police service in Northern Ireland. They are well used to dealing with disorder in Belfast, but normally it's in certain locations. Some of the locations mentioned to have protests tonight were already well known as being areas that have had previously history of serious disorder, so they would be well used to dealing in those areas. But the fact it has been spread literally across the city, and we've seen from the aerial views from the Sky helicopters, it moves across the city, it literally has been spread across a wide geographical area. That makes it challenging, or even more challenging, for police commanders to move their resources around and have enough resources at one particular scene to deal with it safely and then allow the fire services to come in and put the fires out.
Yeah, another fire blazing there. I mean, sometimes they're in the middle of the streets, aren't they? Earlier, it was bins that were set on fire, Graham, and then a bus, and then vehicles. Certainly, our correspondent, Conor Gillis, suggesting that a retail space that was an Arabic shop may have also been set on fire. The problem is that is below a block of flats, and then it becomes extremely concerning. So, you know, we're watching from our helicopter. Earlier, this was part of the police tactic, as Graham's suggesting, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, extremely experienced, using their armoured Land Rovers to push through some of the blockades in the streets, in fact. Let's just watch. Yeah, Graham, talk us through these pictures.
Yeah, they're very well used to using their armoured Land Rovers. They tend to either spread themselves across the street and drive up the street, or they'll literally filter into like a single file, as we saw in the images there, and work their way through the barricades. The metal crash barriers are no resistance really to an armoured Land Rover, and you can see one literally just drives into one there. But they will literally follow in line until they get to the end of the street, and then they'll form up again. But they are exceptionally experienced in using their vehicles almost like a moving cordon. We saw images earlier on where they lined the vehicles up across the road, drove them towards a crowd of people, with the police officers actually behind the vehicles, so using their armoured Land Rovers as almost like a barrier or a shield against the protesters ahead of them. So, as I said, Police Service Northern Ireland, you can see it now, this is the image I was talking about. They spread them out across a wide junction. Slowly the vehicles will move forward. You can see the officers behind the vehicles, some with their shields out, ready to actually deploy in ahead of the vehicles if need be. But the vehicles move slowly forward and carefully distance the crowd. You can see that's part of the M2, a major junction in Belfast. So obviously the key there was to move the protesters away from the junction and get the traffic flowing again. But exceptionally experienced in using their vehicles, more so than most other forces in Britain in using their armoured Land Rovers. Other forces tend to use personnel carriers, but in Northern Ireland they use the armoured Land Rovers for obvious reasons.
Yeah, absolutely, providing some protection from the projectiles that were being thrown towards the police officers. Graham, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Well, earlier we spoke to the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Baroness Arlene Foster, who gave us her thoughts on the situation unfolding in Belfast.
Well, it's with great sadness. I've been watching the pictures from Belfast, from Portadown, from Ballyclare, where violence is happening right across Northern Ireland. And as the leader of the DUP, Gavin Robinson, has said in a tweet that you referenced just a few moments ago, this is not only wrong, of course we condemn the violence completely, but it's entirely counterproductive. I mean, if these people are genuinely concerned about immigration issues, this takes the whole spotlight away from that issue and onto the violence in their own communities. They're destroying their own communities. I know the Newtownards Road very well, and they're a working class community. They have it tough, and now they have this violence going on, buses being burnt, houses being burnt. My goodness, how absolutely dreadful. And young people are going to end up with criminal records again. And the people that are causing this violence and moving the protest from a peaceful protest to a violent protest have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. So, of course, I call for calm, not just calm, but I call for young people to go home. The peaceful protest has now turned into violence. And unless you want a criminal record, you need to get home right now. I have to say as well, I listened to the Chief Constable today, a Chief Constable of a police force who finds itself often in the middle of everything, having to try to hold the line, having to try to keep order on our streets. And he's right to say that immigration issues are not a matter for the police. They are a matter for the politicians. And the politicians really have to not just listen and acknowledge the concerns that there are right across Northern Ireland, and indeed the whole of the UK and Ireland at the moment, but they have to then take action to do something about these dreadful, dreadful crimes. I cannot even comprehend what happened in North Belfast last night when I hear the injuries that this gentleman has had and who's in hospital. And of course, we think particularly of him and his family tonight. But the police are in the middle of all of this, and they're the guys that are trying to hold the line, and it's very, very difficult.
Arlene Foster there. So let's just show you a picture. Looks like another shop is ablaze now. The fire service again outside. We believe this to be the Shankill Road. That was where earlier we saw those armoured Land Rovers pushing through, trying to get through the barricades. But obviously a great concern when retail spaces or homes are set alight instead of bins and vehicles in the middle of the street. So we're watching this. Just Arlene Foster there talking about the victim in all of this needs to be remembered. A man in his 40s suffered significant injuries to his eyes and slash wounds to his face. A kitchen knife allegedly found at the scene. And certainly the heroes are now being identified who came to his defence. One of the men, Matt McKiernan, aged 32, described as a national hero after he struck the defendant with a hurley, a wooden stick used in Gaelic games to immobilise him. Ali, I know you're giving specific praise to those who chose to step into danger.
Yeah, the reason I am is because, frankly, we're living in a bystander society where people just walk on by and actually would film someone actually being knifed to death but not step in to do anything to help them at all, as long as it's posted on X. I mean, so, frankly, I think these people should be applauded. I mean, the very fact that you put your own life in danger by going and whacking someone with whatever this implement was deserves a lot of praise, and I think there are other people as well who were shouting and getting involved. Thank heavens for them that they did that, because I see it all the time. I see it every single day in this country, where people break rules with impunity. They go through train barriers at tube stations without paying, thinking it's their right to pay, not to pay. And when you challenge them, they give you lip. And then people actually don't want to get involved, because the reason why they don't want to get involved because they fear of being stabbed. And if you look at this kind of... The first thing I thought about when I saw the images today, this horrendous attack, was actually the killing of Lee Rigby some years ago on the streets of Woolwich, the Fusilier who was hacked down. I mean, in plain daylight, absolutely shocking stuff. And really full applause to the people who actually got involved.
So we're watching efforts then by the fire service in Northern Ireland to put out some of these blazes. Let's head to East Belfast. Our correspondent, Dan Whitehead, is joining us now. You know, once again, you know, you're watching fires being put out where you are, it looks like, Dan.
Yeah, every corner we turn almost, we are seeing these pockets of violence. We're on McMaster Street in East Belfast, where you can see the fire crews behind me are working to put out a blaze in a house here, this compact terrace row of houses. And you can see as well a vehicle has been completely burnt out here. This is what we are hearing is one of multiple properties that have been set alight tonight in a series of acts of violence. I think it's interesting to note as well, earlier this all started just off this main road with the bus being lit after the bins set those on fire. Then we saw up on Shanklin Road some more bins set alight there. Now we've seen houses set alight, which is obviously extremely disturbing and has been condemned by the First Minister here in Northern Ireland, accusing them groups of masked men going around and setting on fire family homes. So extremely worrying scenes here on the streets of Belfast. I've just in the last few minutes been chatting to the direct neighbour of this house that was set on fire. Helen Williamson was forced to be evacuated in the last hour. This is what she had to tell us. On fire. Can you tell us what happened?
I just heard the bangs and folk running up and down the stairs, and then we get chapped all the doors and told to get out. So I got out with the dog, and then we managed to get back in. I didn't see anything, and then the motor went on fire. So we were told to go out because there was another motor on the other side on fire.
Were you evacuated from that? How did you feel when that happened?
Well, I'm a bag of nerves. Because I've been here 28 years and this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this. So
it's been horrific, the violence here tonight. What do you make of this violence, given what happened 24 hours ago?
Well, if it's supposed to be a protest, high damage property and everything else. They're disturbing everybody else in the street because they were told it could be another couple of hours before they can get back in.
Helen Williamson there, the neighbour of the property. You can see that the fire crews here in Belfast are continuing to work to put out. Described this fire by Michelle O'Neill here as nothing to do with community. This is outright thuggery. That's the words of Michelle O'Neill tonight. You know, as I've been describing throughout the evening, as we've been seeing across the city, there are pockets of violence. The heavens have opened in the last half an hour, really torrential rain. I think the police will be hoping that has cleared some of those crowds who had gathered. But this has not been just one central group of a very large crowd. We've seen 100, 200, 300 people gathering, many of them wearing balaclavas, not to be identified, gathering at different parts of the city. We saw that bus, as I say, set alight earlier this afternoon. That was just round the corner here. Now we're hearing of houses. The rain has now eased, but they will be hoping, of course, that people will go home now and try and heed that advice to not come out on the streets and cause this sort of chaos. Of course, we are 24 hours on from that brutal attack just a mile and a half away. And, of course, that man now charged with attempted murder due in court here in Belfast tomorrow morning.
Dan, thank you very much indeed. And certainly we've seen that in the past, haven't we, where rain dampens the enthusiasm for people to be on the streets. Just a reminder of what Keir Starmer said earlier. He described the attack not far from where Dan is, as we heard there, as sickening, adding, I have absolutely no tolerance for abhorrent scenes of violence like this on our streets. Tonight, Hilary Benn, the Northern Ireland Secretary, in the last 40 minutes or so, put out a statement. People have been rightly shocked by the brutal attack in North Belfast, but the police must be allowed to do their job so the law can take its course. The scenes of disorder we have witnessed in some parts of Northern Ireland this evening are only damaging communities and putting innocent lives at risk. There is no justification at all for this type of thuggery. I echo the call from the PSNI for this violence to end now. We will see, Jenny, if the rain helps that. But, I mean, you know, homes ablaze, cars ablaze, buses ablaze, shops ablaze. It's been a very difficult night of reaction for Northern Ireland.
Well, I don't think you could call it a reaction. This is just rioting. I don't think it's got anything to do with any serious discussion about immigration, about asylum, or even about violent crime. It's now just a bunch of thugs setting fire to things. The idea that they're making any political point is ridiculous. It's just pockets of rioting. And it's a great shame because there are serious issues that need to be discussed in all of this, but they need to be discussed in due course once we actually know what we're discussing. A horrific video of a horrific crime was circulating on social media and something terrible happened. Fortunately, there were some very brave people. We saw the worst of humanity and some of the best of humanity. And those brave people appear to have saved this person's life who is in hospital recovering. When this case comes to court, we will know what happened in the commission of this crime. But, you know, the idea that there is any sense to be made out of these pictures that we're seeing now, that there's any kind of political protest going on is, you know, we should just dismiss it out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to take from what you said. One, of course, is that the filming of incidents like this by mobile phones, put out for all to see, you know, exacerbates the sense of outrage from people. Secondly, as well, it throws again into sharp focus our immigration and asylum policies in the UK, which, John, is a completely political question. It's been the focus for politics for years now, you know, and it could lead potentially to Reform being the lead party come the next general election in the UK.
Well, they're ahead in the polls at the moment, but a long way to go yet.
But this is their main focus, is it not?
Well, yes.
Incidents like this,
and it was Nigel Farage who today said that indefinite leave to remain, is being, as he put it, dished out like Smarties. Now, all the parties in recent months have been talking about really strengthening their policy. Labour, Shabana Mahmood, since she's become Home Secretary succeeding Yvette Cooper, has toughened Labour's policies. Longer qualifying periods for indefinite leave to remain, up from 5 to 10 years. Similar policy from the Conservatives, talking about newcomers should wait 10 years instead of 5 before they can apply to stay indefinitely. And Reform UK, talking about indefinite leave to remain will be abolished, and immigrants will have to renew their immigration status indefinitely in 5-year intervals. I should just perhaps point out that in
just to pick up on the reform policy and indeed what Shabana Mahmood says. The suggestion is, for example, reform, getting rid of indefinite leave to remain. You have to keep reapplying for a visa.
That's right.
Suggestion, therefore, that people that come to this country cannot be settled, cannot integrate into community, cannot build a family here, get work properly, feel committed to the nation. So this is deeply controversial stuff.
Oh, yes. And that's exactly what it says. Indefinite leave to remain will be abolished. Immigrants will have to renew their immigration status indefinitely in 5-year intervals.
Ali, your thoughts on, where we are tonight, what we've seen and what the mood is, separately from the streets of Belfast, amongst the British people, really, on incidents like this?
The mood's not good. I mean, the mood's absolutely dire, beyond dire, and getting worse. I mean, look, when the Prime Minister says, and this is the front page of the Times, I have absolutely no tolerance for abhorrent scenes of violence like this on our streets. Whoopee-doo. I mean, fine, anyone can say that. I mean, none of us do. What does that actually mean? How does that translate into policy? I mean, he's the Prime Minister, and it's no little wonder that he's probably going to be on his way out if you come out with platitudes like that. You're in government, you make the decisions about what you want to do. What's happening on asylum?
Well, to answer that question, I think what we'll hear from him tomorrow will be he will talk again about swift justice. We've seen it before with the Southport riots and so on. People brought to court very, very swiftly. Don't forget, he is a former chief prosecutor in Northern Ireland before he was Director of Public Prosecutions. So I think he will, as you may call it platitudes, but I think he will talk about bringing these people to court. One of the things I was interested, actually, listening to Graham, I haven't heard any numbers about arrests yet this evening. Yeah. Maybe the police feel it's too early, but it may well be that a lot of people will be in court for rioting, as well as the person accused of the stabbing.
Yeah, well, there was more breaking news tonight, this time concerning Iran and the US. The US has launched a series of retaliatory strikes against Iranian targets. That comes after President Trump accused Iran of shooting down a US Apache helicopter patrolling the Strait of Hormuz. Well, tonight, US officials have said an Iranian drone collided with the helicopter, downing it. Our US correspondent David Blevins has the latest from Washington.
We're hearing from US Central Command. They say forces began launching what they are describing as self-defense strikes against Iran at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. They say that was at the direction of the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump, in response to yesterday's downing of a US Army Apache helicopter. They're choosing their words very carefully. They say this mission is a proportional response to unjustified Iranian aggression, and in many ways that echoes what President Trump himself had to say earlier. It was the president who confirmed that this Apache helicopter had been downed, we understand, off the coast of Oman. The 2 members of the crew were rescued by an unmanned drone boat. That's a first for the US military. But the president's response was notable for various reasons. He talked about the necessity of having to respond to this attack. It's very unusual for him to give Iran advance notice that he was planning to attack. In fact, in the past, he said it would be stupid to do that. And of course, this attack comes just 24 hours after the president told us they could be just 2 to 3 days away from a deal between the United States and Iran to bring this to an end. Of course, he has been saying that for 2 to 3 months. And my read of all of that, I suppose, is that the president has felt obliged to respond, but he didn't want to derail the negotiations completely, to dash any hope that there may be of a breakthrough that would bring this war to an end. And that's why they are describing this as self-defence and proportional. They're effectively repeating what they did last month in response to the Iranians attacking a US ship when the president called America's retaliation a love tap.
David Blevins there, and certainly after the US Central Command said it had initiated retaliation, Iranian state media reported a number of explosions in places like Bandar Abbas and in Keshem, which are directly north of Oman, and Ras Al Khaimah, which is the northernmost emirate of the UAE. And just to bring you up to date, actually, the Reuters news agency, quoting Iran state media, says the situation is now reported to be calm after US attacks on areas in southern Iran, but we'll certainly keep an eye on that. Next up, though, we will be taking a look at how the newspapers are covering the Belfast attack and its aftermath. Back in a moment.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Well, it is now time to see what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. Let's start with the Eye, which leads with the plea for calm from the police as vehicles are set alight in Belfast. The story is also on the front page of The Guardian, which describes the scenes in Northern Ireland as an eruption of violence. And the main story, too, for the Daily Mail, which details how the suspect arrived in the UK. The Telegraph also goes with that, suggesting there is an asylum loophole. The Daily Express carries praise for the men who stepped in to help the victim during the attack in North Belfast. And the Times describes the attack that sparked the unrest we've seen on its front page. So let's talk more about some of those newspapers, shall we? Starting potentially with the Times, Jenny, because clearly there've been a plea for calm from all politicians, and yet we've seen this evening, fire of bins, buses, vehicles, houses, retail spaces as well, with flats above them. It's been a very difficult evening.
Yes, and of course the papers, because they're newspapers, a lot of these papers, the front pages were printed before those atrocities in Belfast happened, before we had pictures of any of that. The front of the Times is such a shocking image, though. I mean, no matter how many times we may have seen these images today of this alleged attack on social media, it doesn't fail to shock. But of course, the Times has two images on here, an image of the suspect, but then also an image of the man who stepped in with a hurling stick. We're learning a little bit about Gaelic sports here, but he stepped in with a hurling stick. Incredibly brave, the potential consequences. You have somebody alleged to be armed with a kitchen knife perpetuating a violent attack in broad daylight in front of people. Well, not in broad daylight, it was at 10:30 last night, but you can see it was in full view of people. So you do have to remember that whilst you have, there's incredible darkness in humanity, you also see the best of humanity in situations like this. But the emphasis, obviously, with the Times in the headline is that he was a refugee. He had been granted asylum, and the police very quickly announced his route into the UK, because we know in the past when images like this have gone viral on social media, which they do, because there is, it's incendiary, and there's also monetization of clicks nowadays in a way that there wasn't before. When there's a vacuum of information, people speculate, and the police were trying to avoid the kinds of scenes that we are seeing in Belfast tonight by saying that the suspect apparently came from Sudan, through Paris, into Dublin, and then in a bus over to Belfast, where he claimed asylum on the same day as he arrived in 2023. He was given leave to remain here for 5 years. That's what we know, but there's still so much that we don't know. And yet there are so many people who want to fill in the blanks, which is a shame, because we should be having a conversation about what this means with a cool head and in possession of all the facts.
Yes, and worth bearing in mind that the suspect, who is, as you suggested, a 30-year-old Sudanese national, was charged this evening with attempted murder, possession of an article with blade or point in a public place, and threats to kill, and due to appear at Belfast Magistrates Court on Wednesday. The victim, a man in his 40s, suffered significant injuries to his eyes and slash wounds to his face, an attack that the Prime Minister Ali called sickening and has prompted the scenes that we've seen in Belfast and, in fact, across Northern Ireland tonight, which make the front page of The Guardian.
Well, look, the attack itself was an absolutely appalling, shocking, heinous attack, and clearly our thoughts are with the victim of this appalling crime. It will be interesting now to understand exactly on what basis this individual was granted asylum in the first place. We understand he was from Sudan. It will be also interesting to understand if he's got any history of any mental health issues, because clearly someone who does this must be deranged in some way. So I don't know. We'll wait and see what the background on that is. Irrespective, the person who's been attacked here, absolutely appalling. I do applaud the individual who came in and actually tried to protect that individual. Very, very brave to do it in a bystander society. Very welcome. That said, none of this is an excuse for wanton violence on the streets of Belfast. None of it at all. We need a calm, rational, hard-headed look at what is going wrong in the asylum system. And frankly, I don't have faith in it at all. I think a lot of British people don't either. They are quite fed up of people coming in, threatening young girls, in this case doing an attack. We keep hearing these stories again and again and again, and there's clearly a lot of tension around the asylum system, and a lot of people in this country feel that we're being taken for fools.
Yes, indeed so. Front page of the Eye, police plead for calm. Well, that didn't help, did it? After this knife attack that we saw on Tuesday evening, as the far right pushed for protests, including in Southampton, for example. Political leaders calling for calm. Nigel Farage, though, said leave to remain status is being handed out like Smarties, and calls for the suspect to be named with the details on the suspect. Let's just listen to what Nigel Farage had to say.
We're dishing it out like Smarties to people we haven't properly checked. But always appeal for calm. Let's be calm. Don't cause a fuss. Don't frighten the horses, unless, of course, it's George Floyd, somewhere in the Midwest of America, and then then it's fine to be angry.
Well, the Daily Mail talks about the Sudanese knife attack suspect got asylum after taking the back door to the UK. Many of the newspapers have picked up on this. Of course, the problem is the porous border, which is necessary for peace between, a part of the Good Friday Agreement between Ireland and Northern Ireland as part of the Brexit.
Still remember Tony Blair and John Major standing at that border saying, has anybody thought about the border between Northern Ireland and Ireland? Right? And here we are. I mean, this is a classic case of where this whole thing falls down. This individual took a plane, as we understand it, from Paris to Dublin and then took a bus up to Belfast. Now, what is there to stop anyone else doing exactly the same thing in future? Answer, nothing. Nothing at all. Because no one's policing that border, quite understandably, because if they did, there would be issues around that. We don't want to be going back to the Troubles again. So what do we do in this type of situation?
But this man was granted asylum. It's not like he snuck in and was staying in Northern Ireland illegally. He was allowed to be there. True. So he would have been interviewed, he would have been assessed. We need to know about what happened there and on what grounds he was given this 5-year leave to remain. This isn't an illegal migrant who didn't have permission to be in this country. And that's why these kinds of discussions are sort of useless at this point until we actually know the details of the basis of which he was in this country. The police have said this was not an act of terrorism. And, you mentioned before the murder of Lee Rigby. That was an act of terrorism. So we have absolutely no sense of what was going on here, other than it was an apparently horrific, violent crime.
We'll see if we get more details at the the court hearing, which is expected tomorrow. But some terrible scenes, certainly in Belfast, for example, a home on fire, a retail space on fire too, with flats above it. It has led the First Minister of Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill, to say groups of masked men burning families out of their homes is nothing less than disgusting cowardice. This has nothing to do with community. This is outright thuggery. The attack in North Belfast was heinous and wrong, but there are dangerous attempts to exploit that, to target and attack innocent people who are simply trying to live, work and raise their families here. We'll certainly keep an eye on the situation in Belfast. But let's move on to more news which came today, which concerns the World Cup. And this is a fascinating clash with Trump's America, is it not? Which is travel bans. This is the front page of the Mirror, which is travel bans which have impacted fans, but also now a Somali referee who has been barred from entering to work in the World Cup.
That's right. He's been barred from entering. I mean, it's the biggest stage in the world that he's now going to miss. He was denied entry at Miami International Airport on Saturday, and apparently he's one of the most acclaimed referees in the African continent. So he's won awards for his refereeing. So it's not clear. The US authorities are not giving any explanation whatsoever for why this individual has been barred from entering the US. And I suppose they don't have to, but clearly not good for him, not a great look at the start of this for the US, but I don't think they really care.
Well, we've caught up actually with the director of the White House Task Force for the World Cup. It's Andrew Giuliani speaking to James Matthews.
Andrew, can I ask, why did the referee Omar Atan, why was he refused entry to the United States?
Look, there are a few things we can't talk about, but what I can tell you is that anybody who's communicating with bad actors that plan harm against the United States of America are not going to be admitted entrants, and we're not going to allow a soccer tournament, no matter how big it is, to threaten Americans. What we are proud of is we're proud of the work that's been done from a visa perspective, the fact that all players, all coaches up to this point have gotten in the country. We've worked extremely hard with Consular Affairs, with CBP and USCIS to make that happen.
Was he in contact with bad actors, and who were these bad actors?
Again, there are some things that I can't talk about. What I can tell you is we're going to make sure that this is a safe and secure tournament, not just for American citizens and permanent residents, but all the people who legally are traveling here to the United States.
Yes, obviously related to the Rudy Giuliani as well. Asked him if this is a racist World Cup, which got a flat denial. But 4 nations which have qualified for the World Cup have a travel ban to the US, meaning fans can't or will struggle to get in. Haiti qualified for the very first World Cup ever. Iran, as we know, they've had their visas pulled. They're playing 3 group matches in America, not in Mexico, where they've got their training camp. Iran's ticket allocation was pulled today, and Senegal and the Ivory Coast, and like the Senegalese, those in the Ivory Coast had to secure tickets before December, where the rules tightened. I mean, it's, you know, is it open or not open?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I heard today that there is a possibility that Iran and the USA could face each other in the football, which would be an interesting match to watch. I mean, what I think this shows is how unusual this World Cup is, because usually host countries are doing whatever they can to make FIFA happy, but this just shows how much the US is more powerful than FIFA. Doesn't care about maximising host nations' ability to have their 8% allocation of fans at the World Cup. Doesn't care about having internationally recognised referees there. They are the ones who decide what happens, and they're not going to make any accommodation. So this is going to be an unusual World Cup.
It would be a bit odd, though, to be fair, if there's an ongoing tensions going on between Iran and the US, to be allowing Iranian fans in from Iran into your country. I mean, that would be a bit odd.
Yeah.
Genuinely, it would be, wouldn't it? I mean,
isn't it more? But what's more odd than playing a friendly game of football when you're trying to kill them?
That's also odd. That's also odd. But yeah, I mean, look.
The whole thing is very odd.
There's been bombing in multiple sites tonight alone, from the Americans to the Iranians. Let us go to what they're calling a historic day for victims, which is, you know, it is a man on a train who admits he'd had too much alcohol and starts to try to stroke the hair of a woman. And it's the first man who's been convicted under a new sexual harassment law after grabbing a woman's hair on a train.
Yeah, he didn't try and stroke her hair. He grabbed her hair and tried to kiss her. And yeah, I mean, maybe he was drunk and maybe he was flirting with her. But I think this is good. You can't do this in a civilised society. Don't do this, you know? This is something that happens to women, by and large. And yes, women can harass men, I know this, but the likelihood of a lone man on a train and a drunk woman coming up and pulling his hair and trying to kiss him is infinitesimally small.
Well, in my case, extremely small.
But we have to make the point that in this country, this is not OK. We don't condone this, and it's a good thing.
Jenny's right, but I think that this argument that's made, oh, he was just drunk. Well, don't drink then. If you can't manage yourself properly and you're going accosting people on a train, just don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh. You know, people have got themselves in situations.
They have.
Right, this is a big one. If we go to this story, it's in the Telegraph. Rachel Reeves suggests that tax rises may be necessary to fund defence. Now, we clearly are still waiting for the defence spending review. The decision's still not being taken by Downing Street. To be fair, the defence scene is changing rapidly. We've seen that from Ukraine, that drones are now the focus. But do we want to see that tax rises might have to go up? Would the British public like that?
Of course not. I mean, already we have record levels of tax. We have an enormous benefits bill that Labour, despite its majority, cannot seem to do anything with because of opposition from the backbenches. And once again, this is a kind of, what's it called, a flag that Reeves is putting up to to see how well it is received, but it's potentially terrible for the economy because, again, we are paralysed whilst we don't know our tax is going to be going up. This is what she's been doing for the past 2 years.
Yeah, two budgets, each one with a 6-month run-in, which has partially destroyed parts of the economy.
Look, the problem is we had the Strategic Defence Review last year with Lord Robertson. He's been getting increasingly frustrated that decisions have not been made about funding. The Defence Investment Plan, he needs to get it sorted out before he goes to the NATO meeting at the beginning of July. So it needs to be resolved. At the weekend, they were talking about, or it was being floated, that it would be cuts to the transport budget and other departmental budgets. Now they're basically chickening out again from making any cuts at all, and it's going to fall on the taxpayer potentially again. There's only so much squeezing you can do of the cow. At the moment, we've got $3 trillion of public debt, so they can't borrow anymore. Reeves knows that. She's fiscally hemmed in. But how much can you tax? I mean, they've already increased tax on employers' NI and increased the minimum wage, and we see the impact of that on jobs at the moment. So, look, none of it's easy. And even despite all this, there'll still be a $4 billion shortfall in what the defence need.
Yeah. And just very quickly, a picture after the success of Artemis 2, we reveal Artemis 3, or at least their crew. In one sentence, they are going to
not go to the moon, even though they were supposed to go to the moon, because we're still waiting for Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos to produce a lunar lander that will be able to take them to the moon.
Jenny Kleeman, Ali Mirage, thank you so much for taking us through this evening. Thank you. We have the sport next. We will hear from Thomas Tuchel on whether or not he thinks England are favourites to win this summer's World Cup.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety, as Russian drones will be trying to find this position.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood, hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful.
With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force.
This is routine training for NATO. But should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans.
The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
People that pod together, they have a little hive brain going on.
They've not had a good week.
I've had a good week. There's a teaser there, a teaser.
OK, nothing to see here. Drama over.
Full stop.
Anyway, we'll get to that.
She will be mortified.
Because she's the first female chancellor.
I popped upstairs, made myself a cheese sandwich, and now I'm with you.
Annalise has come dressed in the magenta of electoral dysfunction. Available wherever you get your podcasts. The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood has rallied around her. It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Well, World Cup build-up. Let's get some more sport. Here's David.
That is a lovely scene for anyone involved in Nepalese cricket. To be here at the Wankhede Stadium, it is a great opportunity. They are one of the sides on the up.
Challenge for Nepal is the firepower that England possess. But in many ways, with this being their first game, it's almost a free hit. Nobody expects them to win here. And they might just dare to dream a little bit in front of their 12th player. The fans, well, they'll bring great colour, great passion, and great excitement too to this third World Cup journey for them.
Will do it for Nepal. Can they hold their nerve here?
When the fixtures came out, and it came out that we're playing England at the Wankhede, the first game, the captain, Rohit Portal, he contacted me and said, this is great. They are so excited, not only playing a World Cup, but getting the opportunity to play against teams like England, West Indies. It's been a dream of a lot of our players to represent their country here in India and particularly the Wankhede.
I'm very excited, especially to represent Nepal in the biggest stage. It's a proud moment for all of us. Not only the players, but I think the fans, for them, is also a very proud moment that Nepal is representing in the biggest stage of the game, that's T20 World Cup, and they'll be cheering us.
What a game we've had. Are we going to have a last ball thriller? Are we going to have a six to finish things off? England breathe again. Great credit to Nepal, who will look back at this as a missed opportunity, but they shouldn't really. They have been absolutely terrific. England all smiles, but they've been tested. Nepal, take a bow. You've been absolutely brilliant. They have been put under immense pressure by a very talented and aggressive Nepal side.
Heartbreak for Nepal again. They give the two-time world champions, well, an extraordinary scare. They did almost everything but climb their Everest. They pushed it right to the very peak, but they couldn't quite get there.
They can hold their heads high, put together a real good account of themselves in this run chase. England win by 4 runs.
Barris, great to see you. Can I take you back to last evening, though, because we're speaking here on the van after what was an incredible game of cricket. Your lads did the country proud, so near, yet so far. What are your overriding emotions of what you witnessed down the road?
David, thank you. Let's take a look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the weather will be a bit of a roller coaster for the rest of the week, with the current cool and showery conditions giving way to wet and windy weather on Thursday. Friday showers will die away to leave a drier and warmer weekend. So overnight showers will become increasingly confined to western coastal regions. There will be a few inland, but many eastern counties will become dry with clearer skies. Temperatures will fall back into single figures quite widely, but some rural areas may see values low enough for a touch of frost, would you believe? Wednesday will be another showery day, but with lighter winds, the showers will be slower moving. It'll be cooler too. Daytime highs lower than Tuesday's by a degree or so. Wales and the southwest will become largely dry through the afternoon as more persistent rain approaches from the Atlantic.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, that was the wrap. Thank you so much for watching. A busy night, certainly. We've seen violence on the streets of Belfast. We've seen the Americans bomb again sites in Iran. Top stories next on Sky News.
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching. Good to see you again. How are you? Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
Hello, you're watching Sky News. I'm Nick Qureshi. Here are the headlines. Disorder in Belfast as a 30-year-old Sudanese man is charged with attempted murder over a stabbing attack. Northern Ireland's police chief had urged people not to be duped into violent disorder. And elsewhere today, the US launches retaliatory strikes on Iran after an American Apache helicopter was downed over the Strait of Hormuz. Hello, good morning. There's been disorder on the streets of Belfast in the last few hours after a 30-year-old Sudanese man was charged with attempted murder over Monday's knife attack in the city. He is due to appear in court later today. The victim, a man in his 40s, remains in hospital with serious eye, facial and back injuries. A number of properties and vehicles, including a bus, have been set alight, with protesters also throwing stones at police. Earlier, police and political leaders had called for calm on the streets. Northern Ireland's Chief Constable said where there are any concerns about immigration, let's have those through a political debate. While Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill has criticised the damage caused by the protest, she said groups of masked men burning families out of their homes is nothing less than disgusting cowardice. This has nothing to do with community. This is outright thuggery. The attack in North Belfast, she said on Monday, was heinous and wrong, but there are dangerous attempts to exploit that to target and attack innocent people who are simply trying to live, work and raise their families there. Racism, intimidation and violence, she said, are wrong wherever they occur. There can be no excuse and no justification for these attacks tonight. No one wants to see this on our streets. And I, again, appeal for calm. OK, let's run you then through what has happened so far in Belfast in recent hours. Footage showed masked men dressed in black setting fire to bins that were blocking this road. Moments later, those bins were pushed against a bus parked by the side of the street. Then the bus, a glider bus, as it's known, was engulfed in flames. As the police arrived at the scene, they were met with protesters throwing objects at their vans. Then, in residential areas of the city, a car was also set alight. According to one senior police officer, protests remain sporadic pockets of disorder in a number of locations in Northern Ireland.